大家好。好，大家好。喂喂喂喂喂喂喂喂喂喂，大家好，大家好。哎呀，今天是今天是第一个测试直播。
He doesn't really, I imagine, want to ride 84 kilometres on his own in 35 degrees.
Well, you'd imagine not.
I mean, he's a time trialist, so he might be a bit odd, but probably not.
Groupama FDJ, the team that have now come to the front of the chasing peloton to try and close the gap once again.
More or less the entire team on the front. There are 10 of their riders in the race, and I think at the minute they're all on the front of the peloton. This team, of course, Arkea B&B, have lost both of their sponsors for next year. So it's, you know, if you're riding for this team, you are already probably trying to put yourself in the shop window a little bit. So any of the Arkea riders at this race are going to want to have an opportunity to put in a strong ride. You don't ideally want to just be domestiquing for Kevin Van Klaan if you can avoid it. You might just want to put in a good kind of lap out in front on your own. May be part of the philosophy here.
It is that time of the year, but he's put in a really good push on this climb to open up a 28-second lead on the 5 riders who he initially broke away with on the previous lap. So with 5 laps to go, it's advantage Costiu with Labrosse, Roland, Maisonneuve, Lance Duby coming across the line
that
a little afterwards.
Like more than 10 seconds to me.
And this main peloton comes across the line, but as you can see from the numbers, that too has whittled down from the opening laps. 5 to go, 82.3 kilometres in total, and the advantage enjoyed by Ewan Costiu is around 30 seconds from the next. Remy Cavagna is in this particular group. Theo Delacroix as well, and the Saint-Michel Preference Home Uber 93 team.
Yeah, we've got about 70 odd riders, I think, in that, looking at that, the peloton now. So it'd be interesting to see how many finishers we get today if we get into those last few laps. And the attack's going again.
Alexis Pruneau pulling away here, and he's got company. I think that's Rudy Moya.
Yes, it is. Has been on the podium of this race a few times. Would dearly love to take the title. Oof.
Oh dear.
Oh, that was a crash a long time in gestation. It happily looked like he landed on something soft.
Yeah, Emmanuel Morin just misjudging that. Quite a sharp right-hander.
A little bit unexpected on his sort of whatever this is his 8th go at it or whatever it is, but
well, I just wonder, because he worked quite hard to get into that group of 3, I wonder whether he's just going slightly quicker into it, because they were accelerating than he has been previously, and that's what's led to him just misjudging it.
Yeah, it's just the kind of that slightly greater urgency. He's just kind of braking late, braked a little bit hard, locked up the back wheel, and got it back in control, but not going in quite the right direction. So that's one of those horrible crashes. You know that one's coming. You've got at least a second or a second and a half for life to slow down, and you to contemplate your imminent arrival in the hedge. Meanwhile, this man is doing a really nice job.
Yeah, pacing himself well. Very comfortable out there on his own at the moment.
he would love some help, but he doesn't have any help, so he's clearly decided that for the meantime he's committing to this. And he's a decent time trial rider, so I guess why not?
We're in the era of the long attack.
Very much so. Very much so.
Still plenty of Groupama riders up towards the front, along with Decathlon riders as well. These two teams trying to pull the pace along. 34 seconds or 35 seconds now the gap.
They won't be, they're not going to be concerned at this point because a rider out there on his own at that distance to go, he needs to be getting that gap to comfortably over a minute before any alarm bells are going to start going off back with these guys. But he is building towards that. Warren Barguil at the back looking for service. Another former champion.
Yeah, back in 2019 when Warren Barguil won this race, but looking as though he requires some assistance here.
Another one of those kind of French riders of whom an enormous amount was expected at one point, and he's had a very solid career, but maybe just not quite what we expected in mid-2010s when he broke through. Kostya here he's no stranger to a break. I remember him being in at least 2 or 3 of the breaks at the Giro last year. So he's not afraid of being off up the road. And he's just continuing to build that lead out. He's had 37 seconds in less than a lap. Although I'm always guilty of getting a little bit excited about the prospects of a solo attacker. My sympathies are, from my own career, my sympathies are always very firmly on the side of the lone attacker. And I'm always guilty of getting a little bit overexcited about their prospects, because in the end of the day, this is going to boil down sometime quite soon to one rider against 10 or 15. And that tends only to work out in one direction.
Yes, but I think that this is the romantic within you coming out. Everyone loves that story because it's pitting it's one person against the rest of the peloton.
Yeah, it's certainly not the pragmatist.
No. Well, Emmanuel Morin has managed to just tag on to the back of the peloton once again after his little skirmish with the side of the road.
A little bit of cyclocross.
And a tad more urgency at the front of the peloton. It seems to be going in ebbs and flows at the moment. So they're upping the pace. It had been at an average of 44.4. The average on that last lap, 47 kilometres an hour. And it feels like it's probably going to be as quick on this lap as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, the race, as you said, on the last lap, the race kind of came back together, and there's kind of a reset. The race starts again. And obviously, with a race this length, I mean, most of the serious teams, the serious riders in here, feel the race maybe starts at 80 k's to go.
Advantage of Kostya just appears to be stuttering a little out in front.
Yeah, Remy Rojas is on the front of this group and has been chasing with a degree of commitment. You can just sort of see the urgency now. This team at the front are really pressing on. They've decided that this particular solo adventure is not to their liking, so they are going to be pulling him back. And then we will see, you know, we'll almost certainly start to see more counterattacks. It's the great pleasure of national championship racing, and particularly, I'm going to say, particularly the French national championships, which I've covered before, there is a sort of a spirit about the whole thing. It's conducted with a degree of sort of aggression that produces kind of great racing and very unpredictable racing. It's kind of a mug's game trying to predict what's going to happen in this race, because you genuinely just don't know. Eoin Costiu is staying committed. I mean, he never knows what's going to happen back in the group. This is, you know, the point of this. You have to keep pushing, because you just don't know, what's going to happen back in the group. Warren Barguil finally gets service from the neutral service car.
Well, he's been waiting a while for it, Warren Barguil, but now he does have that assistance. Groupama FDJ bringing this lead down quite rapidly at the moment.
Warren Barguil, of course, from one of the teams that only have 2 riders in the race, so relying on neutral service, or possibly relying on somebody in one of the other teams might have agreed to help him out, but whatever he was looking for there, I assume it was a wheel change he was getting from neutral service.
Very focused from Groupama FDJ.
Remy Rojas still on the front. Just making way. And we're suddenly down to 19 seconds and then to 16 seconds.
And you can see perfectly once again with this wonderful helicopter view along a relatively straight road that Costiu is just having a little glance over his shoulder, and he will be able to know that behind the charge is on, and Groupama FDJ are not going to let him potter on off the road and enjoy himself. So he's just going to, I think, sit up a little and wait to rejoin the fray as everything comes back together, albeit a reduced main peloton.
Yeah, you can just see he's just taking the opportunity to, as you say, Jono, refuel. He knows the way the wind is blowing here. It's a good effort, that, though. It's the kind of thing that it's worth, if you're a good roller or if you're a good time trialist, it's worth throwing something like that at it, because you just never know. You could just stimulate a stalemate back in the group. As I said when he attacked, I think what he really wanted was a little bit of company to try and get another small group going off the front, but he didn't get it.
You mentioned time trialling, and Bruno Amiral, of course, he pulled out of this men's road race, but you were watching him a couple of days ago become French time trial champion for the 3rd time in the last 4 years. Just how impressive was that performance?
It was very, yeah, he was terrific. He was just leading comfortably, more or less, the whole way through. Never leading massively, but it always looked profoundly in control. I'd looked at the course, and I had very confidently off, my time as a time trial. I said, oh yeah, this is a course where everyone's going to overcook it in the early section. So if you're leading at the first time checks, we had 4 time checks. I said, oh, if you're leading after 7 kilometres, you're not going to win. And Bruno Amiral comprehensively proved me wrong. I was a little bit surprised. I felt his time trialling form this year hadn't been quite as good. Every time I watch the National French Time Trial Championships, I confidently predict the victory of Remy Cavagna, because he always looks so good for the first 15 or 16 kilometres. And then he always lets me down in the last 5 or 6, because he always just seems to push that little bit too hard, and his form starts to go in the last few kilometres. But we've seen, I'm not completely sure whether he still haven't seen if he's at the front of this group. We have an interesting little break in the peloton here, because this is almost the entirety of Groupama FDJ have steamed off the front with a single rider from Decathlon with them. This could be fun.
It looks a little bit like a training ride.
Yeah,
And at the moment, the response isn't that quick from behind. Arkea seem to have come to the front and realised just what's happening up ahead of them.
Oh, it's like a Groupama FDJ chain gang ride. They need to catch this. Somebody just sitting on the back of this group at the front of the main peloton just let the wheel open up and nobody went over the top fast enough. I imagine they'll catch them, but adds to the gaiety of the French Championships.
I'm sure they will catch them, but it's going to require some effort to bring them back in because they're going to work naturally very well together.
You would hope so. You never quite tell. You get a team that of that size, but they certainly ought to work well together for the first few kilometres. They're just not really pulling out the advantage. They're doing their best with it, but that group is close enough behind that they're still going to be getting a little bit of draft from them. So unless something changes, they will pull them back.
Another nasty little pinch point there, which riders have to be cautious of as they come out of that bend. One member of FDJ is just dropping back, but that's the gap between almost, what is it, 9 riders from Groupama FDJ up the road and the chasing peloton.
And the peloton are kind of a little bit of the urgency is going out of that gap, in spite of my thinking, oh, we're going to pull that back. A little bit of the urgency is going out of the peloton. There's a little bit of looking around going on back there. I imagine Bay & Bay Hotels, Arkea Bay & Bay, are going to be, again, under a little bit of heat. They spent a lot of the day chasing things.
And they come through a series of roundabouts before coming into Les Herbiers proper, and then they will start the climb up the Mont des Alouettes as they exit the town. And yeah, this advantage is growing.
I think the peloton just hesitated, and these guys obviously aren't hesitating at all. So that gap is, as you say, just beginning to open up a bit. Tom Donnerworth on the front. Let's see who's sitting behind him. Cyril Barth behind him, and Clement Rousseau. Romain Gregoire is in this group, which will be causing a certain amount of alarm behind. And Valentin Madouas, so strong group.
So yeah, Madouas sitting there, second to last wheel in the group. Quentin Pachier there as well. Nance Peters just doing some work at the front as Tom Donnerworth is done. They both have quite a few riders, Groupama FDJ, with this attack up the front.
Yeah, they've popped a couple. It's getting to that time in the race. I noticed the Decathlon have on the road. They will certainly be keen to chase this down. They're not going to regard having one rider up the road the Groupama Chain Gang ride as something they're happy with. So there should be, there should be a coalition of teams in the bunch willing to chase this, because Arkea will be chasing and Decathlon will be chasing, and Total Energies will be chasing. But for the minute, they're just not getting themselves organised. They're letting them hang out there at 22 seconds. They're not steaming off into the sunset. They're not just letting them go. Maybe they are quite keen on themselves out trying to make that happen. I don't know.
Seen plenty of Breton flags as we've come through this particular lap. They've the Breton flags out in force. Valentin Madouas, of course, from Brittany. So, hoping for some more success.
Paul Lapierre sitting second wheel, the defending champion, would have been very keen not to be riding too soon. On the other hand, I keep sort of thinking that I keep noticing how far through this race we are, if that makes sense, John. I can think, oh, he's not going to want to be riding this early, but actually at 67 kilometres to go, particularly the way we've seen races unfold this year, you need to be riding early, as Arnaud Démare, his race seems to be over for this year.
Joris Delboy comes to the front of this chasing group just to try and put some pace into it on the climb up to the Mont des Alouettes. On the final lap, that of course will be the Flamme Rouge inside the final kilometre, and you can see that this little addition of pace at the front of the peloton is starting to close that gap from the Groupama FDJ riders up the road, up the hill, but it's also having its own impact on the peloton, which is becoming strung out once again. And this is what you would expect every time we go up the Mont des Alouettes. You're just going to lose a few more riders, and it'll become more and more selective as we get on to the final laps of this course.
It will be, and one of the things that's hard about this is that there isn't a descent after this climb. There's a difficult plateau section, so your opportunities for getting back on are a little bit limited. Paul Sexas just pushing off the front. That's interesting.
Paul Sexas and Louis Barret. Big cries of Allez Valentin as the Groupama FDJ riders come over the top of the climb. Some grimaces on the faces of riders as well, because they're having to work really hard, but the lead enjoyed by Groupama FDJ is going to be closed by Paul Sexas and Louis Barret.
Done a lot of damage back down in the peloton. There are riders here who aren't going to be getting back on. There's riders here who are going to be doing another lap, and I was going to say going to the team buses. Not even. Most of them are going to be going back to their friends, their family, their car. Some of the teams will have kind of proper support here, but quite a lot of them won't, because small teams. If you're the one and only rider from Little Trek, they're going to send a bus for you. And this is just, we're going to have a little phase now of riders just kind of everywhere. And the feed, of course, becomes a more and more dangerous place as the race goes on and the speed goes up. Bottles being dropped, a lot of ice socks being handed out. And the temperature will just keep climbing. I think actually it's forecast to be hottest of all today after the race finishes, but that just means that it's going to be getting warmer and warmer and warmer as we head towards the finish. I don't envy the riders this, I have to say. This is a hard day out. Everyone's safely around that corner this time.
Yes, it is a hard day out, but as you said earlier on in our broadcast, it is also a good warm-up for the Tour.
Yeah, and it's a big deal in France. The national championships the weekend before the Tour de France, to wear the jersey at the Tour de France, even maybe to push for selection, because a lot of the teams haven't made their absolutely final tour pick at this point, and this is the last opportunity to put yourself in the frame for that.
Romain Grégoire just had a little chip off the front there. He's been joined by, well, 5 riders to start with. 6th one just trying to tag on at the back.
I'm quite enjoying the fact the live ticker I'm just watching in the background has just announced that the peloton has exploded, and I think that's a fair description of it. Just like a slightly wider shot, because I suspect when that group comes back together, that might be the bike race for the moment. It's one of the things that a lot of the bigger teams will be very keen to do, is just keep the pace high and thin out. You know, they've got numbers, so if you've got 20 riders, you can afford to spend 5 or 6 of them pushing on the pace on that kind of climb, just to try and detach the riders from the smaller teams who don't have the help, just to kind of cut down the number of your competitors and the number of problems you have to solve.
And we're just seeing the extent of that exploded peloton now. It really has wreaked havoc. And so many riders from Arkea BNB once again left behind.
They have been chasing something all day. A hard day out.
It'd be interesting to note just how many Groupama riders have remained up the road here. Decathlon have seen them have the odd snipe off the front. This one being marked.
And no assistance forthcoming.
Another couple of Groupama riders now making their way across as well.
And if this whole kind of group of riders who are on the screen at the minute, the attacks begin again. I'm going to say, if that group of riders stays together, that may well end up constituting the peloton.
Kevin Vauquelin. First time we've really seen him.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. First time he's put his head above the parapet all day. I guess it's the first time he's got himself into the front group.
And having seen all of those Arkea BNB Hotel riders back with the main peloton, I was fearful that Kevin Vauquelin was with them, but here he is up at the front of the race. A select group who've made their way out in front, and it has a feel to it, this group of permanence.
I would agree with that. All the caveats about wild national championship tactics, but this group have got quite a substantial gap, and just at the minute there are enough riders, particularly from Groupama, who are prepared to come to the front and work to try to make this stick. And as we've seen, Kevin Vauquelin has even been prepared to come to the front and do a pull. Question now for somebody like Vauquelin is whether he can, on his, I don't know that he's on his own, but he hasn't got a lot of support. It's whether he can make this race hard enough the next couple of ascents of the climb to just start to thin this group out again. We've got a group just drifting off the front here. Is that Paul Lapierre in the front of that group? Sorry, Paul Lapierre. The same thing is happening to this group as happened to the entire peloton. It's just the attritional nature of the racing. Suddenly the racing is on and people are injecting a lot of pace. And once again, we're just seeing the race begin to break up.
We've got a group of 6 riders who've just pulled away. 2 from Decathlon, 3 from Groupama. And they're being hunted down. Kevin Vauquelin, who was at the front of the race just a moment ago, is in the red jersey behind in the chasing group, and he's having a word there just to see if they can work more effectively together. But the problem that he faces is that in that group of riders that he's with, you've got a rider from Decathlon and a rider from Groupama FDJ, and they aren't going to feel that they need to work to catch up with the front group because they've already got riders there.
No, they're very happy to leave it to anybody else who wants to chase, but you just see the importance of the sheer numbers that Groupama have brought to this race. I mean, it's interesting that Total Energies have even more riders and somehow haven't quite managed to achieve the stranglehold that Groupama, because Groupama have been running this race all day one way and another. I'm assuming actually the Soudal rider there is Paul Magnier, which is interesting because I am a little bit impressed that he is in that group, because I thought this might be altogether slightly too tough a day and too tough a course for him, and I'm wrong. And certainly even on his own in there, you wouldn't want to take him to the finish because he's certainly the sprinter of the group. I think we are getting a little bit more organised back here. Groupama just keen to be at the front, getting in the way slightly. And Julien Bernard has been left trying to tow this group across.
Once again, good to see Julien Bernard making his way up towards the front of the race, though.
He's been working very hard all day. I would be surprised at the end of the day if there's any one rider, except maybe Remy Cavagna, if there's any one rider who has just worked as hard. And I don't think anybody will have worked as hard on his own account as Julien Bernard. Just, you know, because he doesn't have any teammates, he's having to be his entire team. It's a tough row to hoe. If anyone can do it, he can. But it's very hard to combine working this hard in the mid to late sections of the race with being ready for the final. And he's just been trailed off the back of that chasing group in the background. I imagine he'll get back on, but these groups are clearly going to come together.
Yep, he is just managing to tag back on, having been distanced probably by about 2 or 3 bike lengths for a moment, but he's back there now.
Suggests he's working ready. You didn't see quite so he trailed off the back. He might have been some other reason, but it suggests he's working reasonably hard. He wanted to take whatever recovery he could. It's just a little bit of a descent there, and obviously the draft behind the riders in front is a little bit longer when they're going faster on a descent. So you maybe give yourself a little space, but a hard day out for him. There are a lot of groups of riders out on the road. The only thing they all have in common is that every single one of them has a Groupama rider in it. This is Nicolas Prudhomme at the back of this little group. And Valentin Madouas just in front of him, so he's trying to chase back up towards the lead group.
Paul Lapera, Dorian Gaudon, Rudy Moyard, Paul Bedouet, Clément Rousseau, alongside Paul Magnier in this front group at present.
Paul Magnier is the interesting one in that group to me. Riding with only one teammate, he's got Antoine Hubé is in the race somewhere as well. I think he's still in the race, I'm not 100% sure, but he is, for a rider who's quite exposed on his own, he's got himself into this front group, and very strong classics rider, but mainly leaning towards sort of the sprint side. And yeah, he's got himself into this group, which is a very strong ride from him.
And pressure here in the front group. They are putting pressure on that group behind. And they're knowing that Valentin Madouas and Kevin Vauquelin are present there, just applying the pressure.
Yeah, Valentin Madouas obviously has the luxury of being able to try and lean on other people to do the work. As he illustrated beautifully just there, he's not going to do a turn here if he can avoid it. He'll be leaning on Nicolas Prudhomme if he can.
This is the section of the race where they head south down towards the southeastern end of Les Herbiers before making their way back into the town and up the Mont des Alouettes once again.
And you can see from the flag just a little bit of a tailwind pushing them along. Tailwind obviously helps a group that are up the road. The smaller groups work more efficiently in a tailwind, but this is clearly going to come back together again. Julien Bernard, you can just see on the front. And these guys just trying to chase onto the back of that again. I'm not quite sure where this group was distanced. I'm assuming it was just in that fracturing up the climb the last time when the entire race kind of exploded. We are getting towards the foothills of the Mont d'Alouette again. 49.5 will be the next passage of the finishing line, so they've got 2 or 3 kilometers to get themselves organized before getting to the base of the climb again, when presumably exactly the same thing will happen again.
Still a very healthy representation for Groupama FDJ, but
yep.
also a very good representation for Decathlon.
Yeah, Decathlon have got, as I said earlier, a slightly smaller team. There are only 10 of them here, which in the context of Total Energy and Groupama isn't a huge team. Defending champion, of course, to try to protect.
I was just trying to work out, is that Axel Laurence has managed to find his way onto the back of the group again?
Yes, it is, I think. He's ridden kind of, to me, quite a canny race so far. He's kind of in the same position as Julien Bernard, for example, but yeah, sneaking around the back of the groups. We've really only seen him attacking once.
Well, they come back together with just over 3 kilometers to go. Total Energy just looking to put a bit of a springboard in there. 16 riders now in this lead group. Paul Lapera, the defending champion in the French national road race, is up in this group. Kevin Vauquelin has now made his way in there as well. Julien Bernard is present, Paul Meunier and Axel Laurence. So all the big guns, really.
Say that's a very exclusive group of bike riders. Wouldn't expect much inertia behind the chase. Total Energy is probably not completely happy with the composition of that front group. I think otherwise most of the teams probably are happy with that. Depends a little bit how that group works now, simply because it is so largely composed of riders who are going to end up looking at each other before all that many more kilometres pass. If they work together, you would expect them not to get pulled back 18 seconds of the minute. I guess we keep an eye on that. That'll be 18 seconds of this group. I don't actually know where the peloton is. I think the peloton might be quite a long way behind by now, actually. No, I think the win's going to come from that group of 16, and maybe if these guys manage to get across. The problem we have here is that the only rider who's working there, was that Louis Barre again, or I didn't see.
I think it was Louis Barre, yes. He's the only rider from Intermarché Wanty who is in that group. So, yeah, he's got a bit of a thankless task as far as chasing this group down is concerned. Le Mont des Alouettes taken on once more. And when they come across the line, it'll be 3 laps to go. Valentin Madouas.
Madouas being distance again, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look.
I mean, he might have just dribbled off the back to get through the feed nice and safely, because he has sort of hopped back on and he's chased back on relatively easily. So, but he has just been sort of. We've seen him on and off the back of groups all day. He just isn't looking just quite as nailed on as one might have expected. I mean, he did Tour de Suisse, which was a hard race and isn't all that long finished. So he may be just struggling a bit to recover from that. Of course, he's got Tour de France next week, so he may be one of those riders who we talked earlier, just a little bit caught between the fatigue of one race and the need to try to sort of prepare for the next race, and may just not be completely happy. I don't feel like he's quite had the form this year that he's had in the last couple of years, so maybe he is struggling slightly.
As you can see now, with those splits coming up on the screen, I think 110 is where the main peloton lies, and there might be a few riders just 15 seconds in front of them, but it really was blown apart on the last. Well, the last circuit, it was the last attack. It was the ascent here at the Mont des Alouettes where it exploded, and then on the aftermath. And so the race really has been on since then, and we've now got a really selective bunch of riders, 16 of them in this group, and one imagines in 50 kilometres time it's going to be one of these riders who is crowned the new French national champion.
I would think so. I mean, Groupama FDJ did exactly what they wanted to do, in that maybe not exactly how they planned it, but that big group, their chain gang that went away a couple of laps ago, has managed to really force the selection on the last climb up here, and they've now done what the big teams want to do, which is get the race down to something that they feel they can manage, and they've done it in such a way that they are very well represented at the front of the race, and they've brought they brought Valentin Madouas as maybe they're kind of the rider they're looking towards for this, but he's been sitting at the back and hasn't necessarily been looking as imperious, so we may end up looking towards somebody else in this group from them. I don't know. There's Romain Grégoire and Rudy Mollard are both in here as well. And I think Decathlon are probably also pretty content, because they've got defending champion and Paul Sexas both in this group. The big danger, I think, to all of them, if he stays there, is Paul Magnier. I think there will be teams who will be very keen to try to shake him off if they can, but I'm not sure that's going to be easy.
So across the finish line, 3 laps to go. 25 seconds advantage over the closest chasers. There are 16 riders in the group, and Louis Barre leading this group. They're going to have to fight really hard to latch back on.
that's going to be quite a task for Barret, really riding on his own. The ticker is showing him as pulling it in a little bit. I'm not sure how pleased everybody, if he makes it across, I'm not sure how pleased everyone else in the group's going to be to see him arrive with yet more reinforcements for Groupama. But you can just see how the race has fragmented. We've got 3 laps to go. We've got riders coming across in 1s and 2s. And what's left of the peloton arrives with Cofidis on the front of it, unsurprisingly, since Cofidis are the big team that don't have anyone in that front group. But I think, to be honest, their goose has been cooked for the day. So they may have started the race with 17 riders, but they haven't managed to get any of them into the selection. Louis Barret and his companions are going to make it across. I am impressed.
Well, it's been a real battling performance from Louis Barret. As you said, I don't know how popular he's going to be with the rest of the group, other than those clad in the Groupama FDJ colours, because it once again returns Groupama to, I think, almost a full complement of riders. So of 19 riders, Groupama with a very healthy showing and plenty of options.
It's beginning to look like the Groupama club run again. Julien Bernard has been very attentive at the front of this group, even doing kind of the occasional turn. You can sort of see he's trying to get on and off the front in kind of as quickly as he can. His concern here is that this group fragments again, because it's still quite a big group. He's clearly feeling very strong, but he absolutely doesn't want to get caught out if the group fractures. And he's prepared to put a little bit of work, a little bit of energy into riding at the front and even doing the occasional turn to make absolutely sure that he doesn't end up stuck in the position of trying to chase on his own.
Well, it's been at this point on each lap that we've witnessed so far that those riders out in front really do get the opportunity to push on and use the natural gradients to regain just a little bit of energy. I see Axel Laurence come to the front for a pull here.
He's having to look at the race exactly the same as Julien Bernard is, because he also is isolated. Both Decathlon and Groupama are sharing the work in this group at the minute, because essentially it's in everybody's interest to keep this group away. It just depends at what point a counter-attack starts to come out of this group, on what formation that takes. Just for the minute, for this lap, probably that's the situation is stable, if you like.
further refreshments and water being cooled, and a little bit of a kind offer being extended here to plenty of other riders. So the difference between this group of 19 and the chasing peloton is up to 1 minute and 11 seconds. So it really does look as though these 11 riders are the ones who are, well, 11 riders? I just shrunk the group. 19 riders are going to be the ones who contest the French National Championships. And on current speed that they've been going, we've probably got about an hour's worth of racing to go, maybe a little less.
I always sort of love the bit of one of these sort of attritional races, you know, particularly a championship race where you get to kind of the selection of the heads of the race. Always is a slightly odd complexion at a national championships where there's some very big teams because it's quite such a domination of Groupama, but there's something I always slightly enjoy about the race sieving out the strongest riders. Eddie Letouze and Warren Barguil, who were 10 or 15 seconds in front of the peloton, have sat up. Total Energies, I imagine, will be still chasing the peloton, because despite their huge numerical advantage, you would think the biggest team in this race is Groupama, but you would be wrong. Total Energies came in with 23 riders. They haven't really managed to play that strength in numbers the way they would have wanted to. Brick Roland sitting on the back. He did a lot of work in that first big group attack that we saw from Groupama, so he may be feeling it slightly. And they're working together pretty well. Every time someone flicks an elbow, someone comes through to take a turn. We haven't yet got to... They clearly haven't decided that a minute 5 over Total Energies chasing in the peloton isn't the sort of thing where they can afford to start playing games. So we've got all of the teams have got some riders. All the teams with multiple riders have sent people to the front to do a bit of work, mainly, as we can see, Decathlon and Groupama.
Very focused and just good working relationship between this whole group at the moment. They will want to, I'm sure, reduce the numbers on those final 2 laps.
Yeah, if you're from one of the... We certainly will see the teams like Axel Lavrence and Julien Bernard will be pushing up towards the front on that final climb, on the final climb of the lap, the big climb we've talked about, the Mont d'Alouette, because they'll just be aware that Groupama and Decathlon are both at that point want to try to push the pace just to see if they can thin the numbers down a little bit further. There are 1 or 2 riders in there, like I mentioned, Paul Magnier, who's on his own, who all of the bigger teams would be quite keen to get rid of him if they could, because he'd be a very serious threat in the final if he's still there.
Do you think that due to the gradient of that, of the final 2 kilometres, Paul Magnier still will be seen as a major threat?
I think if he's still there, then yeah, certainly, because he's not a pure sprinter. He's a kind of a classic sprinter. He can handle himself in the gradients, and it's not that steep. Even up sort of towards the top and into the finish line, it's really only hit a 4%, 5%, something like that. It's not the kind of climb that suddenly shuffles you into a different class of rider, like we saw Stevie Williams win Flèche Wallonne earlier this year, last year. Where you're looking at a rider who's kind of a climber slash sprinter. You're looking at someone who's got that kind of fast twitch explosivity, but combining it with weighing sort of 61, 62 kilos. We're not quite into that territory. I think we're still probably, for a rider like Paul Magnier, I think we're still possibly in somewhere he might hope to perform. What we don't know, of course, is what more it might have taken out of him riding kind of on his own to actually be in this group in the first place. So it may well be that he's really just hanging on and has already burned whatever matches he's got.
It's a fascinating scenario that we have laid out before us now. And here is the aforementioned Paul Magnier, just grabbing a bidon.
He looks happy enough, I'll be honest. The peloton, Cofidis and Total Energies are hanging in at 70 seconds for the moment. They haven't given up on it.
Team-wise, at this stage, Groupama FDJ, very much the team, you would say, in the box seat with a plethora of different options that they can use. But all of the big guns that really are involved in this lead group. So as a consequence, it really is, it's a very open race at present.
Yeah, I mean, there are 9 Groupama riders, I think, in this group of 16. And they're going to look a fearful bunch of idiots if they don't manage to win this from here, I'm going to say.
Well, that's definitely what it feels like. It really does. But the only concern I would say at the moment that probably their favourite to win it would be Valentin Madouas. And we've just had a couple of glimpses of him where we might well be reading way too much into it, but he just hasn't looked as though he's as strong as he has been in the past, certainly not as strong as he was in 2023 when he won this title.
No, I think I would agree with that. He hasn't just quite looked this year as he has the last. I guess we'll see. The thing is, they've got so many options, and they will be, they'll be talking to each other and trying to work out if they're not confident in Valentin Madouas, as Rudy Mullard on this kind of a finish is capable of unrolling a very serviceable sprint. Romain Grégoire is and also a strong rider, so they have options.
.5 kilometres to go. They're coming back into Les Herbiers. Approaching the end of the third last lap. Really good ride from Julien Bernard to be up there at the moment. He finished second 12 months ago. Louis Barret, who of course put in so much work to get across the line. Barth, Alfonso Grégoire, Madouas, Mollard, Quentin Paché, Paul Penhoet, and Brière-Roland, Clément Rousseau as well, Kevin Vacalin, Louis Barret, Paul Magnier, Julien Bernard and Axel Laurence are riders out in the lead with just over 2 laps left to go.
Julien Bernard, of course, was third 2 years ago as well. So if you like a numerology approach to bike racing, he's been third, followed by second. And coming into this year, and he looks very strong. Because he's on his own in a sort of very distinctive kit, you know, we notice everything he does. But he has looked strong throughout the race, and he's been active in all the groups he's been in. The question is just whether he's put too much down too early. And in some ways, you don't have a choice because you can't go for the win if you're not in this group. So you've got to make sure that as the race unfolds, you're in here. But I mean, sort of see him right up fifth wheel here. I mean, coming in towards the bottom of the climb, the top of the climb next time around is 33 kilometres, so that's only 3.5 k's away. So the climb starts when they get through the town here and turn right back out towards the northeast into the little bit of a headwind there is. So he's got to make sure he's in position because there's a potential for the whole race to explode again in a second.
Do you think that this will be, with 2 laps to go when they go up this, isn't it more likely that we're going to see the real attack come on the last, running into the last lap, or do you think that enough of them will be thinking, well, we want to get this group down to maybe 10 riders for the next lap and then 5 for the last lap
I think there are enough numbers from Decathlon and from Groupama that they're going to want to push it on this lap rather than leave it, because even if you don't drop riders off this lap, if you make them work hard, they've just got that little bit less for next time. And it's the nature of attritional racing is that more or less every time you come to the key points on the circuit, you just want to push on. You want to press the buttons because you're just putting other riders under that little bit of pressure. And if you've got numbers, it doesn't matter quite so much. If you've got 9 riders, if you're Groupama, you've got 9 riders in this group. If you pop a couple of them trying to push on the pace in this lap just to put everybody under pressure, that's not so expensive for you because you've got resources.
At present, Hutch, you're sitting in this peloton, you're looking around. If you want to win this race, who are the ones that you're most worried about defeating you, other than Paul Magny?
Well, given my sprint, they would all beat me. I mean, there's... depending a little bit how the race unfolds, I'd still be looking very much at Valentin Madouas. Rudy Mollard I'd be concerned about as well, Romain Gregoire. And Kevin Vankellaan on that kind of final climb. There's a very strong group, and it depends just how big is the group when we get to that final ascent. Because the bigger it is, the more opportunities there are for sprint riders like Paul Magny just to find that little bit of shelter they need and find riders that they can work their way through. So it depends a little bit how much it gets thinned out through here. And we're going to see in just a second how hard. I mean, Groupama now are massed at the front, clearly poised to push this. That group, the gap to the peloton is coming down. We're down talking at 42 seconds now. That has dropped significantly. I was pretty confident these guys were going to run up the white flag, but down to 42 seconds, it's... that front group doesn't look as if much of the inertia has gone out of it, but clearly it has, because that's, in this instance, that's got more to do with why these guys are managing to pull that back now, is because the front group, maybe it's just, despite the large numbers and the large numbers of teams, maybe there's just a little bit too much sitting on and people looking at each other. Because right now, if the ticker's right, that gap is dropping very quickly.
Yeah, that did just catch my eye, how fast that gap was coming down in the approach to The climb up the Mont des Alouettes, and it's potentially looking at the moment. It's a more selective chasing peloton, but it does look as though they might be able to reel these guys in, and that will totally change the face of the race once more.
Yeah, absolutely. Wasn't expecting that. I was completely confident this kind of front selection. I think there's only maybe 20 odd riders left in what we're referring to as the peloton, but at the minute they are just reeling these guys in. I mean, Cofidis and Total Energies would have been raging that they didn't manage to get numbers into this group. So, you know, they should have the numbers to do something about it. But that's a surprise to me. They've got them up they can see them up the road, and it's a bit then of a debate for the front group. What do you do? Do you try to push it at this point, or if you do that, are you leaving yourself vulnerable if fresher riders come up from behind?
Those are the decisions that riders are going to have to make in the coming minutes.
Yeah. I mean, they may well have been unaware that peloton group were still riding as strongly as they were, because there's a tendency, if you hear that, oh, they're a minute and something behind, to go, all right, well, let's not worry about that. And they've maybe just taken their foot off the gas a little bit too much through the circuit, waiting to, you know, there'll be riders in there trying to kind of keep fresh to try to stay on when this climb comes round, or to try to tack on this climb. Maybe they just haven't sort of kept in the back of their minds enough that this group is behind and has got, you know, big teams in it that are, you know, that need to chase.
Total Energy sending their riders forward and continuing to pull along at a frantic pace.
Yeah, Sandy Desjardins just sitting on the back of the Total Energies group would probably be their, you know, their protected rider for the day. And so far they're doing quite a good job of pulling him back into it.
What it also does is give the opportunity for the remaining Groupama FDJ riders to rejoin their team. They come over the top. 2 laps to go then. 8 seconds, all the advantage that is left from this lead group, and a chasing peloton of between 20 to 30 riders.
Well, I really was not expecting the peloton to get back into it. That's a surprise to me. And it just kind of, it's almost a reset for the race. We're kind of coming in now with just 2 laps to go. And we've got really quite a big group now, bigger than I'd have expected. I imagine they'll leave the feed open for at least the next lap in the current conditions, so it's not last chance to get an ice sock or a drink. But the front group just fracturing again through the feed.
Paul Magnier with the flick of the elbow. And once again trying to build a selection.
Just trying to get this, you know, we're trying to break this group up before the peloton to come in from behind.
Yeah, that's a substantial acceleration that they've just done there, because they were, lead was down to, well, sort of as low as 6 seconds we see, and it's started to creep up again. ...181 kilometres completed after the 11 laps that they've done so far. essentially just trimmed the 1 lap off the proposed route. And this selected group of riders out in front, containing few of the Group Armour FDJ riders, just 3 of them, but they are heavily involved in the group that's now trying to chase back on to rejoin these riders. Still, fantastic performance from Louis Barret to remain up there. Julien Bernard is there as well. Paul Magnier, Axel Laurence in the colours of Ineos sits midway through that group.
And just that little kind of attack that's been off the front has injected a little bit more pace into this front group again. And the gap back to the main peloton has just stretched out again.
Well, maybe it was a wake-up call that they required.
Yeah. The thing is that front group should have the strength to stay away. You would expect that to be the case, but whether they just stopped concentrating, whether they were just Twitter they'd written off or indeed with the time checks they're getting, because obviously at a national championship you can't even be absolutely confident about getting accurate time checks out on the course, except really at the start-finish line. So maybe they simply didn't know the group was coming back at them, but they've stretched it out again to sort of 16 seconds, and they're beginning to build a lead again.
Sitting on the front there, Paul Latour and Warren Barguil, just being closely marked by Guillaume Martin. Yeah, and another application of pace out in front.
That feels like a healthy 17 seconds looking back down the road as well. I mean, it's not. Maybe it's a little bit more. I mean, they've still got them in sight, which is a problem if you're in the front group. But there's nothing as depressing if you're in the second group as sort of chasing back to within what feels like you're almost in the wheel, almost in the draft, and then the gap just goes out again. We are seeing more attacking out of this group now, and this is going to be the last 30 kilometres are probably going to be really quite aggressive now, because there's a combination of that group coming in from behind and the numbers in the front group.
And it's nervy, very nervy out in front, because no one wants to get left behind.
No, absolutely not.
Thomas Gachin up towards the back of this main peloton, what remains of it.
And Brian Coquard, the back of the peloton. He would be very keen for this to come back together, because a bit like Paul Magnier, he's a kind of a utility sprinter. And if he can get back to the front group, he will be feeling as if he's got a big opportunity. On the other hand, that wheel is just in front of him. It's beginning to just creep away. He kind of spend his last 2 laps just at the back, chase back on, chase back on, chase back on, and before he gets to the finish, he'll have used up whatever sprint he ever had.
Is this a rider being lapped?
That is a surprising piece of commissaring. We normally take lapped riders out, particularly on its 20-minute lap.
Well, once again, this part of the course has proved to be one of the quicker sections, and it's where we've seen any group that's managed to pull away distance from the peloton really put the hammer down and try and drag things along, and that's exactly what's happening here from our lead group of 19 riders once again.
This group is it's existing in a I don't know, like a liminal space. They're not quite sure what they're doing. There are kind of too many attacks coming in. They're not working quite consistently. They're working consistently enough to keep that gap hovering about where it is. But they're facing in 2 directions, because they're looking behind them at the group coming in from behind, and they're also beginning to think about the finish. So Julien Bernard now is attacked and is off up the road. And and this will come back together, and then the inertia goes out of it, and then it goes again. And at this point, it's really a group that's slightly too big. The bigger teams wanted fewer riders at this point precisely to avoid this problem.
Well, Julien Bernard and Louis Barret are trying to stretch this group and trying to make them whittle down in numbers. At present, just managing those behind to tag on. 4 riders from Decathlon currently sitting on the front, including the defending champion, Paul Lapeyrat. Seven riders from Groupama FDJ. Rousseau, Pachier, Grégoire. You've also got Mollard, Penhoet, Roland and Madouas. But it is getting more and more animated, and the attacks come thick and fast. This latest one from Nicolas Prudhomme as Vauquelin go with him. And Vauquelin will look over his shoulder and see Paul Penhoet also there. But a bit of distance built between those three. And it sets about a counter-attack.
This is just, it's using these little climbs and little rises, because this kind of, the course is never quite flat, and you expect them to wait until the final, the final couple of ascents of the Mont d'Alouette, but they're trying to use these twisty bits of road to just kind of, I don't know how you put it, just make the riding hard enough, just keep putting in the attacks, and hoping something sticks.
Paul Magnier has managed to stay with this, but he looks to me as though he is sucking in oxygen from everywhere he can possibly find it at the moment. Vauquelin.
Gotta go with Vauquelin.
It's the Decathlon riders in the main. This is the second group with Julien Bernard, now joined by 3 of the 7 Groupama FDJ riders.
And they're going to make him do the work. This is the position he's been trying all day not to get himself into. Axel Laurent sitting on the back of that group. But beginning maybe just to look a bit tired.
30 seconds, the advantage that has been eked out over the chasing peloton. They were back to within 5 seconds at the start of this penultimate lap. But such is the effort that's been put on the front by the likes of Kevin Vauquelin that this lead group has pulled away again.
The peloton got to 2 good turns away from the back of this group, and then just through the feed, the last time at the bottom of the climb, through the feed, these guys just got themselves organised a little bit sooner and onto the bottom of the climb.
But you said Groupama FDJ would look rather silly if they didn't win this race from the position that they were in a lap ago. They still do have 7 riders up here, and they've now got one who's charging out on his own.
It is difficult to make this kind of attack on an ascent stick. It's a little bit too easy for the group behind. But this is what they have to do. Groupama will throw somebody off up the road and make Decathlon chase. Decathlon will try and push somebody up the road and make Groupama chase. And just try to tire each other out. And the freelancers, the Julien Bernards, the Axel Laurents are, hoping that they can hang on in this group while the bigger representations try to tire each other out. Well, the danger is that they miss something and end up having to chase on themselves.
Total Energy and Arkea probably a slightly less degree, but Total Energy will be so frustrated with what has sort of unfolded over the last 10 kilometres or so, because they were there, they were back in it, they were about to get riders into the mix for the title, and all of a sudden just a few really solid pushes out the back of the feed zone from the lead group, and it's 44 seconds between the main peloton and the front of the race. And Decathlon now with their turn to attack. Louis Barret hanging on at the back of this group, which is once again becoming quite strung out.
It's so unusual to see the groups come back together, and then, I mean, it's almost unfair to say it's the peloton chasing a group because they're nearly the same size, but it's so unusual to see that kind of come back together and then just stretch out again.
It is the defending champion, Paul Lepera, who has struck out on his own here. .7 kilometers left to go. Axel Laurence is the rider who's leading this chasing group.
He won't want to stay there for very long, and he doesn't. I'd just love to see what kind of a gap this is a committed attack. I'd love to see the other direction. Just how big is that? Just how big a gap has he managed to build up? Because he's going for this.
Yeah, this is a committed effort. And it is fragmenting behind. Groupama have got 2 riders, and Kevin Vauquelin is there as well.
Kevin Vauquelin's a threat from this position.
Romain Grégoire and Valentin Madouas.
This is a sort of a second selection. We've now got 4 of the strongest riders in the race in the first 4 positions on the road. Julien Bernard just crossing, but this group's coming back together. But again, it's putting these guys under pressure, because every time they have to chase back on, it just squeezes a little bit more energy that they're not going to have for 20 kilometres time.
That looks around. It's about a 10-second advantage for Paul Lepera.
Something like that, yes. And there's a bit of the inertia coming and going here, because Kevin Vauquelin doesn't want stuck on the front, and Julien Bernard doesn't want stuck on the front.
Well, he's going to be roared into the streets of Les Herbiers. He goes past the 3 kilometers to go sign. The next time that the riders pass that, it will just be 3 kilometers to go. In this occasion, it's 3 kilometers to go until the penultimate climb of the Mont des Alouettes kicks in around 500 meters time for Paul Lepera, last year's champion in the French national road race. Got to wear the tricolore for a year, would dearly love to do so once again. And he's built up a healthy advantage here, and it's being flagged as 17 seconds.
That's a decent gap. It's a long way to go on a 35 degrees hot day on this. Is a difficult course, but he's a strong rider. He won this race last year. We know that he can do this kind of thing. I kind of still feel he's probably going to get pegged back, is my instinct. Would have a much better idea at the top of the climb.
This group back together, but how effectively are they working on this occasion? That remains to be seen.
And now comfortably in front of the peloton again.
Yeah, almost a minute a lead over the peloton, and the last we saw of the peloton, Total Energy were really putting the hammer down to try and catch up. It's being held off. Paul Lepera now onto the climb. As mentioned, not a tricky one, just over 2 kilometers. Average gradient 4.7%. Keen for some water. It is a brutally hot day. And this is the scene behind him.
This is a hard effort for him out on his own. And this is his shot. If this doesn't work, when he gets caught, he'll probably go straight through this group and out the back. So he's got to make this work if he's going to defend his title. This is his option.
We've seen so much work today from Brieuc-Rollon for Groupama FDJ. He has worked so hard. Marie Lenné, who won the women's race yesterday, present to watch the men's race here in Les Herbiers. "16 seconds, the advantage." Do or die, and there, Brieuc-Rollon.
His day is done.
His day is now done. He has put in so much effort at the front for his team today.
Romain Grégoire, I think, was sitting just behind him, so he presumably takes over. Maybe thinking back towards Rudy Millard for the final.
Glance over the shoulder. Quentin Paché looks like he's cooked as well. But it's 9 seconds advantage. Paul Lepera's brave bid to defend his title hangs in the balance. Dorian Gaudon is the decathlon rider who sits in second at the moment. They come through the Flamme Rouge. That lead once again pulls out to 14 seconds for Lepera. Be quite nice to see him and just see exactly where he is in relation to these riders. We will know over the top of the climb. A brutal day in the saddle at the French National Championships in the Vendée comes down to this. One more lap of the course to go. At the moment, the defending champion, Paul Lepera, is out in front with around a 16-second lead over this chasing group. Groupama FDJ with great representation in there. We've also got the likes of Julien Bernard of Lidl Trek. Axel Laurence of Ineos is there as well. Kevin Vacquelin of Arkea B&B Hotel is there. But this is the man out in the lead. 12 months on from by far the biggest win of his career. He's looking to do it again. What advantage do you think he needs, Hutch, over the top here to stand any chance?
He needs more than 7 seconds.
Tell me something I don't know.
I'm not convinced that that ticker's absolutely right, because the gap's bigger than that. I feel like he probably needs more, but you just don't know what's going to unfold, and behind that's going to be more like 11, 12 seconds, I would have thought.
I reckon it's around 10 seconds.
To me. That doesn't feel like enough to me, I'd certainly have to say.
That's what they are aiming to win.
I think he needed more like maybe 20, 25, 30 over the top of that climb.
So 1 lap to go. And these are the riders currently chasing. And those decathlon riders aren't going to be doing any of the work now.
Absolutely not. And there's a possibility of this. What that group behind is, I think, what is left of the peloton. That's what was the second group we were talking about. And you can just see how they've shed numbers as part of this chase.
Well, they won't want to cede an advantage that they were possibly picking up through this feed zone, because that's what they did last time round. A couple of reaches out there in vain for Dorian Gaudon. And I think he's completely missed out on getting any water. Finally, some success. Paul Lepera out in the lead. 15.3 kilometres to go on the final lap of this French men's elite road race. Manages to pull the advantage out once again. It was down to 6 seconds. It's stretched back up to over 10. Fighting so hard here. And the chase behind just hasn't been that effective.
It switches on and off. In a minute, Decathlon have managed to get themselves at the front to interfere. They just roll through and back it off a little bit. And it means that the other teams, the other riders have to reorganise, regroup, chase again.
Kevin Vauquelin makes his way up into second wheel. Paul Penouet was the rider from Groupama FDJ who was looking to move to the front and push the pace along. There has been an acceleration there. Vauquelin comes through to have a pull.
Paul Lapierre needs to pull this out more, because 9 seconds, even if he was still sitting here at the bottom of that final climb, I don't feel like that would be enough for him. He needs to try to just kind of, and it's so much about thinking about being aero. You know, he doesn't want to push any harder physically. I mean, he's already on his limit. It's trying to hold that aero position, keep his elbows in, keep his head down, literally keep his knees in. But at the minute, some of the momentum going out of this, a counter-attack just going up the, a little bit cyclocrossy.
Paul Penouet is the rider from Groupama FDJ who's gone to pull this along, because as they were just sitting up and coasting through, Kevin Vauquelin was looking particularly despondent about the lack of assistance from those riders behind him, but they were all from the Decathlon team, and at the moment Decathlon AG2R La Mondiale are in the lead in this race. The man who won 12 months ago, Paul Lapierre, is out in front with a 13-second lead, and this group of riders is desperately trying to close that advantage and track him down.
Paul Magnier still on the back here. He will be